Right, so what is a data-driven approach to your career? I'm going to cover that today. Again, I'm Jason Cohen. If you want to understand more of my background, please watch the prior video or find me on LinkedIn. You can see my work history there. So let's go ahead and jump into the fundamentals. This is the fundamental program. We've also got a starter kit as well as pro part of the program. And further built on the mentorship sessions and apply these things. They can really help. So what are we going to discuss in this conversation today? What does it mean to have a data-driven career? We'll talk about the approach of doing it. And also, we will focus on kinds of questions you should be asking yourself when you take this approach. So what does this mean to have a data-driven approach to your? It's about process of structuring relevant information or unstructured information and making it relevant. You have all these different points in the career in which you're collecting data. Why not use that to help accelerate your career in a more formal way with frameworks, just like you would in any work that you might be doing in a corporate job? That's the expectation within the job. Why not have the same expectation for yourself in your career? It enables you to quantify and contextualize your story. So instead of talking in hyperbole, talk about like actual, absolute, and relative numbers, changes, accomplishments, contextualize via the complexity of the challenge that you face or the method that you have to deploy, and levels of seniority, scope. Taking a data-driven approach allows you to be very pragmatic about these things in terms of what things you select to use and what things you select to work on, the plans that you put together, how you track things, and also how you communicate your value. And there's different quantification and contextualization. It could be across accomplishments and goals or progress and how you communicate. I was just talking about these things. And well, it allows for your own assessment, accurate assessment of where you are and where you expect to be, and comparison. Talked about hyperbole concepts, and also allows you, when you have data and collecting it, to take this iterative approach to reflect in like emotional things that you might be thinking about with that career to actual data points that can signal more direction beyond emotions, and also gives you the opportunity to quantify and adjust the process so that you can make improvements. So the big question becomes, all right, in order to do this, I have to start with data collection, because that's what this whole thing is based upon. It's based upon data. So what kind of data should you collect? But first, why doing this? Touched upon this earlier. Why is your career any less important than the work that you're doing for other people, in which you're required to use data to express what's happening? So treat your own career just as important as the work that you're being hired to do. If you don't have the data, you can maybe have a sense of direction, but you can't quantify that sense of that direction. It doesn't mean you have to have everything worked out, but you need to quantify or qualify ultimately where you want to go. And so it helps you to really articulate and understand what you need to do in order to follow that direction or to achieve those goals or expectations that you're setting for yourself. It helps you understand what you should be working on in order to get the results that you want. And it allows you to emphasize things that are really important to yourself and others and add value to your communications. And it helps you to communicate like the most senior leaders and helps you to build the brand that you're seeking for yourself. And then finally, you'll be in situations where you'll realize you made a mistake and you got to hold yourself accountable and you want to express how you're going to make adjustments, and that builds your leadership brand. But you'll also be in circumstances like performance management, where people will articulate judgments on your performance, and when you don't have the set of data in front of you, you can't express it within the context and in terms of problem, method, and results. It's going to be really hard for you to push back. You can't use hyperbole to push back. You can't use hyperbole with comparison against other people to really push back on these things and to stand up for yourself and customers and others. So having the data makes it much more easy to do these types of things and to quantify it and make it real. All right, so what's the first data point that we need to collect? Well, it all comes down to what you expect from your career. Like, what is the end that you want to achieve? What is that story in your head that you want to achieve? You know, your expectations are important because ultimately it helps to inform the direction that you want to set. And expectations, really all they are stories in our head. And if we don't live up to the stories, that's what can cause some unhappiness. You can perhaps change the expectation, or if you're going to go for the expectation, how do you define a clear path to getting it? It's important to understand what you want to expect, because 5 years out from now, you're kind of going to want to be where you want to be 5 years out. And it's important to understand that and to define that. I would say one of the big questions that when I mentor somebody that almost always goes unanswered is I'll ask, well, where do you want to be 5 years out? Most people can't answer that, and I understand why. Then again, many people can't even answer where they want to be 1 year out. If you don't take control of your career and set the direction, life will, or others will. And if you can determine that 5 months out, what about not 5 years out? What about 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, and 6 months? Like defining what those expectations are for yourself. What do you expect in terms of your accomplishments? You're going to want to understand that and collect that. You're going to want to understand what you're learning from a data collection standpoint, and what were the methods? How did you get there? It's going to be important things to articulate when you communicate your value. And then ultimately, kind of like encapsulating this whole thing, it's all about your leadership brand. What do you want that to be from an expectation standpoint? What is that endpoint that you want 5 years from now? You see that headline in a paper or any online or any publication, somebody wrote something about you, and you feel very accomplished by reading that, feel very satisfied by reading that. What would that be? And in the starter kit, you go through exercises to help you to define that. What's the next data point that you need to collect? This is where an honest assessment is very important. We need to collect accurate data. Sometimes we need to take a hard look in the mirror. And if we want to be able to get where we expect to be in 6 months, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we need to honestly know where we are right now. So you need to be honest with yourself, because if you're not going to be setting a clear direction to get to your next milestone, and probably going to have a lot more heartache. You're going to understand, you're going to need to understand, as I said before, what the expectations are along the way to get ultimately to where you want to be 5 years out. And this accurate, honest assessment of yourself and collecting that data, these data points around it, helps you to understand how close or far you are from those expectations and those milestones over the 6 months to 5 years. And it really allows you to understand what's missing. So one of the exercises we go through starter kit is around skills and what skills you have and what skills you need at each of your milestones. And if you kind of flub that and put your ego first and say things and say that you have things that you don't, you're not going to make an effort to actually get those skills that you need along the way. And being honest about what's missing helps you just set up a plan for acquiring those things. And again, that's something that we go through the exercise in the starter kit. So the third data point that you need to collect, what do they expect? Who are they? They are your career gatekeepers. These are people that can have a significant influence on your career. And the ultimate goal with them is to turn them into advocates so that they're speaking about you very positively, even when you're not in the room. So what you see on the top right is a very crude drawing of horrible handwriting, but I call this the ecosystem of expectations. So you have expectations. Many others have expectations. Your direct reports, your peers, your indirect reports, cross-functional people, customers, society, the business itself, partners, all have expectations. And expectations aren't always goals. They can be goals, but many times expectations are the trapped data that we have in our heads and other people have in their heads in terms of the outcomes that they want. And people don't always articulate that in terms of goals. But understanding what those stories are in people's head is important, because it allows you to determine what things you can work on it can really accelerate your career. 'Cause if you can meet those expectations, those hidden expectations, maybe visible expectations, that's one thing. But if you can exceed them and you consistently do that in a way that excites you and motivates you, that's when you really start to get that acceleration in your career. And then there's a thought of like an alignment. You're going to have expectations. I just talked about the expectations that you might have and on a baseline, getting to those expectations that you want. They're going to have expectations too. So it's important to align them. And when expectations align, you're much more likely to deliver on exceeding expectations of others as well as yourself. And we talked about the importance of exceeding expectations, because that's really what gives you that accelerated momentum in your career. And sometimes I call those career catapults. And why is consistency important? And you'll hear this throughout the program. What the data shows is consistency is the number one thing that people of influence, like a board or very senior leaders, are looking for in performance. And that could be sometimes beyond like one single massive achievement, because if you're reliably successful, they know that if they put you in a position to do some type of work, more than 50% of the time, you're going to return the result of success and moves the business forward. So we want to exceed the expectations. We want to consistently be able to do that, because the consistent success is what really drives in the longer term that acceleration for us in our career. So I was talking about these stories locked in our head. You can't read people's minds. You can make inferences if you have strong relationships and had prior conversations. And that's one good way to anticipate or infer the stories in others' heads. But we need to find out, and we need to ultimately ask and to document that. And I talk about that in the starter kit. All right, so data point number 4. What's the thing that you need to do from a data-driven career standpoint? You need to have a plan, okay? You're looking in the plan, you look at the expectations that you have and the expectations of others, and you define targets, big things that you're going to work on that get you to that path of consistently exceeding expectations. And you'll need to look through that plan and understand what should you align on. You'll have your expectations, they'll have expectations, you'll be tracking and documenting these things. Some of these things will be requirements, some of these things will not, some of these things will highly motivate you, some of these things will not. You need to leverage these different data points and different motivations and different requirements in order to determine which of these expectations that you'll collect, you'll ultimately work on. And it's important to measure your progress, right? Because progress is another data point. And you're going to want to know what you're learning and what kind of adjustments you're going to need to make to be successful. But you also need to track progress from a communication standpoint. You're going to need to actively communicate out your progress and your accomplishments in a way that articulates your brand and the value that you're providing. And again, that's something else that I talk about starter kit and in the data-driven career program. I go even deeper in all these areas as well as other areas. And then plan helps you to understand how motivated you might be to do different things, and could help you in the prioritization and selection of expectations that you're going to try to meet and exceed of other people. So the more motivated you are, and that more intrinsically motivated, the more likely you will complete the things that need to be completed. And I go into much deeper into motivation in the program, but don't skip to that. It's important to learn these fundamentals here. And another component in terms of likelihood and consistency of completing the things that need to get done is the ease of things. And in the starter kit and in the program, I talk about how it's important to kind of brainstorm tasks and really build momentum on your tasks towards the expectations to increase the probability of success. All right, data point number 5. What do I iterate and what do I scale? So the process is iterative. Any data process usually is, and that's because data collection doesn't stop at the beginning. We're collecting data during execution and communication. That helps to refine your plan. So that's a point to be factored in terms of your plan. So your plan is agile and you need to iterate. Excuse me, let's take a drink here. Why do we target exceeding expectations? I explained it earlier. That's what really gives you the acceleration and momentum in your career, and it's compounded further when you can consistently do that. Direct and indirect leadership. I really go into this in the program, but in terms of scaling out your capabilities, your accomplishments, and your methods, you need to get to a point where you can indirectly, cross-functionally lead others, build out programs and strategies that others are executing. And going beyond your own plan and going into the more advanced stages and understanding which things you should scale, which things you should work on, and going into the pro part of the program helps us understand what things we should scale and bring others in on to also help lead with us to scale. And that's because this is how you start to even notch up that trajectory higher and higher in your career. And this is accomplished via frameworks. So in the pro program, we will talk about changing your plan and strategy in a framework that other people can take and that they can utilize in order to scale out accomplishments that you can also be recognized for. And then why should you indirectly lead? What does it mean to indirectly lead? It's when you take strategies that you put together, you develop out a framework, you give them mobility, you coach others to deliver them. You are indirectly leading others to execute your strategies, and that gives you scale. And then ultimately, when you have those opportunities to scope up and scale up your work, you'll need to make decisions about what you're going to directly lead end to end or things that you might delegate to other people. So these will be data points that you will collect in the process of a data-driven career. And most of this, number 5, you'll see in the pro part of the programs, not in the starter kit. It's a little bit more advanced. So what do we choose to communicate? That is the 6th data point and the last data point that we're focusing on in the fundamentals. Communication is important. I've articulated it earlier because it communicates your value. It develops your leadership plan. And when it's aligned to a data-driven approach focused on exceeding expectations consistently, you're going to want to communicate progress and accomplishments. And what are the things that you should be communicating? Well, I talked about progress and accomplishments. You also want to communicate those things proactively. You're never going to want to be asked about what's happening. You want to stay ahead of that kind of thing. That helps to build out your leadership brand. And then go more into that through the next stages of the 2 additional programs. Using the right data in the context is really important because it gives the person the sense of the magnitude in which you achieve something. And so I use this reference often a lot, but I can increment $2 million in a environment where the entire business is rapidly growing, or I can increment $2 million in revenue in an environment where the economy is in recession and the business has been in decline for 2 years. Those are 2 different types of stories, and my $2 million accomplishment can be perceived much differently depending upon the context that I place the accomplishment in. Value is ultimately important because from a business setting, that's how you're going to be judged. What's the value of working with you? What's the value of the things that you deliver when people are using them? And those are essentially the 2 kinds of value. And I go very much into the depth in the program on the importance of value and understanding it, and these 2 types of value. Scope. So this is a little bit like the context piece, but scope is, in terms of that kind of data point, is important because it could help to define something like seniority. It's one thing to be working on a project with maybe very junior people. It's another thing to be working on a project with very senior people. That is a larger scope and may have more of magnitude in terms of the accomplishment that you would achieve. And a lot of what I've been mentioning about scope, and scale, and numbers and metrics, those are different forms of qualitative data. And having both of those elements are important because it helps us to understand the absoluteness of an accomplishment, the relevancy, the comparison on the quantitative side. On the qualitative side, helps us to understand the dimensionality and the scope of methods, problems, and accomplishments, and the value that we're creating. All right, so these are some impacts here of people. I'm not going to go through all this stuff right here, but actually I'm going to stop the video right now because I don't think you guys really need to learn about this stuff. All right, so resuming the recording here, the other two things I talked about, a couple of specific impacts with people. Basically, in order to save time, what those impact areas were just what people have been able to accomplish and the organizations that I've worked in when I've worked with them to apply the data-driven approach. And essentially, it's been significant increases in comp and faster promotions, types of things people are looking for, but really removing a lot of the mistakes that we make in our career. So what does it mean to understand the data-driven approach to a career? Covered what it is and why it's important to do it. The 6 different data points, I list them right here. Bring those things together from a fundamental standpoint. We go a lot deeper in these in the starter kit and in the pro programs, which are free for you to jump in on. And ultimately, what do you want to do? So I suggest you learn, go through the vault of content that I put together. I want to help you to be successful. I love doing mentorship, and mentorship really isn't accessible to most people, and they need it. That's why I'm putting these on-demand free programs together for people to use it. And if you want to reach out to me for coaching, that's great. If not, that's cool. And I might do group sessions in the future if you want to enjoy them. And I'll get to the point where you can get to the pro program. Again, that is a free program. There's 3 programs and top 1 performers that you have access to. It's free. When I personally get involved in one-on-ones and group sessions and live stuff, those are some areas where I start to charge. But there's 45, 50 plus mentorship sessions recorded in exercises to just access it. And if you want help, reach out to me. If you don't, that's cool too. All right. So, again, some of the things that I'm proud in terms of my accomplishments using a data-driven career. I've hired many people, help people, dozens of them get to senior level promotions and also comp increases. And I'm not only a mentor, I've also had executive roles and I've been an operator. I think I can add that value strictly from just being a certified coach, and I do have coaching certifications as well. Yeah, I've taken 24 years to build this approach, and I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I went back to get my MBA 16 years after my undergrad. I'm currently getting my doctorate. I'm a few weeks away from starting my dissertation at the time I'm recording this video. So you can always go back and involve school, but I'm hoping you can take my mistakes and the frameworks that I've developed to accelerate your career. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this approach significantly increased my comp in a short amount of time in one part of my career. Got many promotions because of it in over a certain period of time. And while I value situational coaching could be helpful, I find frameworks like these give you some more independence and give you more sense of direction and ownership over your career. So please use them, please use others, adapt them. Your situation's going to be different. If you want to reach out to me for coaching, that's great. There's information on the website to do that as well. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I do this again because I want you to find your path. I love helping people, businesses, customers find their paths. It's part of the work that I do, and I want you to be empowered to do that. So thank you so much for going through this first video in the fundamentals of a data-driven career. There's plenty of others that you can go through as part of fundamentals. Please check them out. And then after you go to that, go to the starter kit and then go to the program. Feel free to offer me feedback. Feel free to share the link to this website to others. They can sign up as well and use it for free, and it can help to benefit their careers as well. All right, so we can now jump into the next video in the fundamentals, and I'll see you later.